Hello, and welcome to the Scientific Ethics lecture on Kant and deontological theories. And so we're going to start out talking about the philosopher Kant, Immanuel Kant, and then from there move into some of the related deontology ethical frameworks. So to take a look at Immanuel Kant and his kind of approach to kind of philosophy and ethics, Kant was basically saying that, you can use logic, you can use reason to work out what it is that you need to do. And if you do that, basically, if you apply this logic, you apply this reason, you can come up with a set of consistent, non-overridable, so basically, a set of principles, moral principles, they're going to work for you in every situation. They're going to be consistent, and they're going to be leading you to do the right thing. And so if we take a look at this, basically Kant and deontology in general are going to be focusing in on the act. And so what they're saying is that the rightness or the wrongness of an act is going to be based on kind of reasoning, based on logic, but looking at certain features kind of associated with the act. Now, keep in mind that this is very, very different from the utilitarian view, where you're going to be focusing on the consequences. And so basically what they're looking at is focusing in on the act, focusing in on the characteristics and the motivation and the intent for doing a specific act. So in the field of deontology, what you're looking at is that the morality of the act is what defines whether or not something should be done or something should be prevented. And so again, keep in mind, in our last set of lectures, we talked about utilitarianism, where we basically made the argument that, the end, the outcome is going to be what determines whether an act is going to be moral and should be pursued. But when we take a look at deontology, we're again focusing in on the act rather than the outcome. So again, deontology focusing on the morality of the act, and this idea then that if you are acting unjustly, you're acting inappropriately, this is going to be wrong, even when it maximizes the expected utility. And so again, saying that the end, the outcome is not what's looked at. We're looking at the morality and the justness of the action that a person will be taking. Now, as we said, Kant was focused in on kind of using logic, using reason, kind of an intellectual approach to determining whether or not an action should be pursued. And so we could define this as rationalism. And again, that view of rationalism is this idea that the way in which we kind of learn about the world, the way in which we understand about the world, is going to be based on kind of logic and reason. And again, this is going to be separate from experience. You don't have to experience an act and its outcome. You don't have to have kind of other things impacting on it. You use your mind, you use your logic, and basically this is going to allow you to determine the morality of an act that you would be considering. Now again, so rationalism focuses in on the mind. It does say that experience is helpful. Experience is going to be there, but it's basically going to be there for more metaphysical ideas, for ideas kind of associated with, does God exist? Those types of questions that we talked about very early on within this course. And again, this is separate from the concept of rationalism or using reason to logic out what it is that you can be doing. Now, an alternative to rationalism, again, if we think back to those very early lectures within the course, the alternative to rationalism is empiricism. Empiricism is this idea that all of knowledge comes from experience. And so there's no innate ideas. You have to be able to go out there and kind of experience the world and experience your actions in order to be able to learn about them and determine whether or not they're moral and should be pursued. And so this concept of empiricism is often referred to as tabula rasa, where an individual starts out as an empty slate, kind of like the diagram on the right-hand portion of the slide. And that experience, those experiences that you have throughout your life are going to allow you then to kind of better understand how life works and what is moral and what is not moral. And so basically then, if we take a look at this, we can see that there, is a debate. There's a kind of a challenge for determining how an individual is going to go about understanding and knowing what is moral and what is not. And so to take a look at this, the rationalists, again, to summarize it, are saying that there are going to be kind of more moral principles are going to be there. It's implanted in us. They're innate, and we can discover them through using logic, through reason. So thinking about them and those thoughts are going to allow us to kind of uncover, or at least discover, these innate knowledge, or these innate moral principles that are going to be present. In contrast, the empiricists are going to be saying that morality is founded then on human nature and human experience. And there, because of that, it's going to be kind of altered and based on kind of the desires of the individual and the experiences that they're undertaking. Now, Kant kind of takes this view that morality is not contingent, but necessary, and it's grounded in our rational will, not our desires. And so basically, that we need to, again, focus in on kind of rational, reasonable thought, rather than kind of going into kind of the emotions and the desires that are associated with what we may be doing and kind of obtaining through an experience. To take this a little bit further, again, focusing in on Kant's view of rationalism, we've got intuitionism, intuition, like intuition, synderesis, is a special mental process which allows an individual to, kind of meditate, to kind of focus inward, to have those kind of rational thoughts, and kind of expose or become aware of the morality. And so again, this is sort of related to the natural law theory, where humans have this intuitive kind of awareness of what morality is. And again, think about this from a view of kind of religious perspectives, where we have different kind of religions having different views on what are morality. And so in this view, we're looking at, the God or the deity of an individual kind of implanting this view of morality within an individual, and through an individual's thought about it, their reasoning, their logic on it, they're going to become kind of aware of what's been implanted in them by their God. Now, if we take a look at intuitionism, this again is the idea that we're going to, use our mental thought, we're going to use our mental processes, use our logic, use our reason to try to come up with, what is moral. But the view of intuitionism is the idea that each act, each circumstance that you may undertake is a situation where you have to consult with your conscience. You have to, apply reason or intuition to this kind of determination whether the act that you want to pursue is going to be right or wrong. And so you're, again, using logic, using reason to determine the rightness or the wrongness of an act. And therefore, with this, we're not, dependent upon a set of rules that are necessary for telling us, what is right and what is wrong. We are responsible for thinking about it and coming to kind of the appropriate conclusion based on, our interpretation of, this innate knowledge that is going to be present within us, that we've discovered through the application of logic, through the application of intuition. Now, like all of these theories that we've looked at within the course, and the ones we're going to look at kind of going forward, there's some advantages and some disadvantages. And so some problems associated with intuitionism is, what happens if you have a disagreement with an individual? If, you think you're acting morally and somebody else thinks you're not. And so if we take a look at this, the disagreement is basically, you're going to address the disagreement by saying, I'm right, you're wrong. You should look more deeply into your conscience. You should think about it more. And if you think about it more, you're going to come around to kind of my way of thinking. And so if we're taking a look at this, because we're, relying on kind of our intuition, relying on kind of our interpretation about what's going to be going on with each circumstance, with each act that's going to be presented to us, this could potentially result in inconsistent moral actions. And so we lose some of that universality of it, because we're not going to be acting in the same way under related circumstances. And so because of that, some problems associated with intuitionism. So again, trying to come up with a slightly different modification of intuitionism. There's a kind of moving from act intuitionism, where you're going to be, looking at each act independent of one another. We take a look at rule intuitionism, and in rule intuitionism, we're basically going to kind of establish a set of rules that we're going to have. They're going to be present, and we're still applying a logic. We're still applying reason. But what we're going to be doing is not looking to apply reason at the act specifically, but we're going to take reason and consult a set of rules that we've received that are there by intuition or reason and logic. And we're going to use these rules to guide us in our behavior. So these rules are going to help us to determine kind of the rightness or the wrongness of an act that we may be considering. And so therefore, we're going to use these rules to determine what's going to be present. And so from this background, we're going to take a look at more detail into Kant's theories. And so if I can get the slide to advance, basically Kant presented three ideas, three theories that are kind of interrelated with one another, and kind of expand on his viewpoint. Kant's theories are described as the categorical imperatives, the principle of the ends, and the principle of autonomy. And so if we take a look at them first, the first theory, the categorical imperatives, if we take a look at this, the categorical imperative is basically an absolute command. This is something that should be occurring regardless of the situation. And so with this categorical imperative, what we're looking at is that the actions themselves are going to be necessary. And all you need to do is to take a look at the effort, to take a look at the action without any reference to the outcome, without any reference or consideration about kind of what that end product is going to be. And so with this approach, we're taking this idea that there's going to be an absolute and universal truth that's going to provide us with guidance in determining, what is the moral thing to do. And this focus in on this idea that we must be acting morally, because the morality, the appropriateness of what we're going to be doing is the most important thing. Again, focused on the action and the reason for the action as opposed to the outcome. So an example of this is the act of goodwill. Acts are only morally valuable if they're done with goodwill. So you have to have a good intent to go out and take an action and have that act be moral. And again, we can take this to an extreme that says that goodwill is the only absolute intrinsic good. And the goodwill, the good intentions of an individual is what makes things morally valuable. And so if we take a look at this, the goodwill then is going to be that overridable idea that all actions you take should be taken with a good intent, with goodwill kind of going forward. And if we take this kind of extreme approach, we can say that other intrinsic goods, other ideas that we may be adopting, other rules that we're trying to adopt, aren't going to be as pure as goodwill, and potentially can be corrupted. And so if you're not doing things out of the goodness of your heart, with good intentions, with goodwill, you're potentially going to be corrupted in your approach, in your motivation for doing so. And so we could still use these intrinsic goods to help to help kind of direct our behaviors. But those intrinsic goods have to be combined with goodwill, or we run the risk of them becoming corrupted and not giving us the full morality of the action that we're going to be hoping on taking. And so this idea of categorical imperatives is this idea that what we're going to have are going to be unqualified commands that an individual must perform their moral duty solely for its own sake. And so again, not focusing in on the outcomes, but be moral for morality's sake, to do duty for duty's sake. And these are things that all individuals must do without question. So an example of this would be, do your assignments, do your homework. We don't have homework in this class, but do the work that's necessary. Do whatever it is that you're assigned to do. Now, if we move away from these categorical imperatives to hypothetical imperatives, this is, when we run the risk of getting into the means ends kind of discussions. We're going to be taking a look at kind of our action in relationship with the outcome. And so these hypothetical imperatives are basically going to say, we're not going to look at the action solely for its own sake. The morality of an action, the morality of something that you're going to be doing, isn't moral simply for doing things based on goodwill. There has to be some consideration that the action is going to be, taken, with a good intent, but also contribute to some other good, some other, kind of desirable outcome, moral outcome, if we're going to take a look at it. So if the categorical imperative is to do your homework, or do your assignments, if we apply these hypothetical imperatives, we basically give kind of an outcome or a reason for why you do that. If you want an A in the scientific ethics course, in this course, then do your assignments and turn them in on time. And so again, looking at this as a good outcome in relationship to what it is that we need to be doing. And looking at this as an example, doing your assignments probably isn't a moral question, but doing your assignments alone and getting them on time and things like that. So if we want to take a look at this, and again, try to apply it in kind of a much broader setting, we still have to kind of address some of the limitations that other kind of moral and ethical frameworks have run into difficulties in the past. And so one of the arguments for a strong moral code, or the ability to apply a strong moral code, is that it needs to be universalizable. For a principle to be rational or moral, it must be something that can apply in more than one situation. It has to be universalizable. It has to apply to everyone, and it must apply in every case that is relevantly similar. And so, it's not a situation where we're going to evaluate each event independent one another if they're kind of related to other things that we're going to be looking at. So a universalizable moral code is going to give all individuals that are following it kind of guidance on what to do kind of in all situations as they go forward. And so this idea then is that if an action can be universalized, if we can apply it in all situations to all individuals, then we can accept it as a maxim. We can accept it as a rule that we can then work with. And if it, is universalizable, it's going to be a moral action to pursue. If the action is not universalized, if it, can't apply to, all individuals, to all interactions they have in all circumstances, then we have to reject it as a rule, as a maxim, and the action is immoral. Basically we're saying that, if you're, going to be acting differently under different circumstances, then, it can't be moral. In order to be moral, it has to be consistent. So that's this idea of the categorical imperatives. The next principle we talked about within Kant's theories was this idea of the principle of the ends. And so what we're doing with the principle of the ends is focusing in on each individual as a rational individual that is capable of kind of using their minds, using reason, using logic. And because each person is that, each person then should be treated with dignity and is worthy of respect. And so for Kant, what that means is we need to treat each other, and we need to act in a way so that we are respectful to individuals. We treat them based on the end product, based on kind of the outcome, not merely as a means. And so you're not merely using individuals to achieve your own outcomes, to achieve your own goals. You're treating these individuals in a way that's respectful and worthy of dignity. When we take a look at the principle of autonomy, this again is a further theory associated with Kant. This idea that what we want to do is act consistently within those universalizable laws. And if we do so, we can discover the moral laws on our own. So we're not, dependent upon some external authority telling us the proper way to act. And so this principle of autonomy is this idea that each individual, by being respected and being able and competent to use reason and logic to determine what's going on and the morality of the actions that they're going to be considering, they don't need somebody else to tell them what's right or wrong. This is, again, focused on the individual's kind of interpretation and understanding of this. And again, the autonomy is going to be kind of compared with heteronomy. And heteronomy, basically the actions are going to be motivated by the authority of the other. And so, your parents or the police or your religious leaders or your political leaders, or even your peers, if we want to take a look at that way, are going to be kind of leading you in determining what are the actions that you should be pursuing. And again, the risk with this is that, you're doing what you're told by somebody else, and you're not developing kind of that moral code within yourself, within your kind of logic and understanding. And therefore, if you don't have that ability to reason out the situation, you are then, potentially going to be, acting immorally if you've got to think on your own. If you're presented with a situation that doesn't fit well with kind of your understanding and your past experiences, you then, are at, a loss for how it is that you determine what you're going to be going and what you're going to be doing in relationship to determining whether an action is moral or immoral. So again, taking a look at some of the problems associated with this, this idea of categorical imperatives, these absolute rules that have to be followed, the duty to obey regardless of the consequences, doesn't allow for exceptions. And we know kind of in life that, all things don't fit into simple little categories that can follow. And so because of that, there develops this idea that if you have these overridability in your principles, again, that hierarchy of rules that are coming into conflict with one another, there needs to be some way to determine, what rule kind of supersedes all the other ones. What actions kind of supersede other actions if we're in a situation where things are at odds with one another. Now, Kant, being a rational intuitionist, is basically saying that, if you're in a situation where kind of the rules or the guidance that, you're using logic to determine are in conflict with one another, what you need to do is use reason, use logic again to make a decision. And so if things are at odds with one another, you have to make your best determination about what it is that you should be doing in a moral and ethical way. So if we do this, it's almost kind of an application of Ross's Prima Facie duty approach. The Prima Facie is this idea, it's Latin for at first glance. And so what you're going to be doing is using this as a solution, again, because we're in a situation where the categorical imperatives isn't working because we can't follow these absolute rules if they're absolute and rules and in conflict with one another. We then have to kind of apply moral intuition, moral reason, moral logic to decide between competing principles. And we have to decide which are the principles we're going to be following at this point in time. And so the intuitive duties then, the categorical imperatives then, are not as absolute as the argument would be made. And so the Prima Facie solution then takes Kant's categorical absolution, Kant's categorical imperatives and the absolutism associated with it, and basically moves it into kind of a modest objectivist system. And so basically you're going to have a series of views, a series of kind of interpretations that are going to be somewhat objective because they're going to be based on the rules and so not as based on the individual, but you're going to use those rules and you're going to apply them in the situation in order to be able to determine what is imperative. And so again, focusing in on intuitive duties, intuition, reason, and logic. And so kind of an example of this are described as what are often described as the 7 intuitive duties. This is a plural set, so there's 7 of them that can't be unified under a single overarching principle. And so these are all things that we can make an agreement, or most people can have a discussion on and probably come to an agreement that these are all kind of important things. They're really kind of appropriate behaviors as we kind of interact with one another. And so, if you're going to make a promise, you should keep it. You should be faithful or have fidelity. Show gratitude for favors. And so if somebody does something good for you, you should at least thank them or recognize it. Beneficence, act, with goodwill. Here's goodwill again, showing up for one another. Have justice, so that we have opportunities to address grievances. Self-improvement, we're not perfect, so we're continually working towards kind of improving what it is in our lives and what it is we're doing. And non-malfeasance. So you shouldn't be acting kind of violently or viciously or with malice or bad intent towards other individuals. So that finishes up this relatively quick overview of Kant and the deontological theories. The reading for today's lecture is to take a look at chapter 8 within the textbook. And again, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you and have a great day.